Hi, and welcome back. Here is part three, the law. So here's the history of laws for learning disabilities. So first we have the education of all handicapped children in 1975. This entitled All Children to a Free and Appropriate Education in the Least Restrictive Environment. Um, and then we have IDEA in the 90s and 2000. It was designed to provide government services for those with disabilities in the field of education. And then we have Section 504, Civil Rights Act. It was to prevent discrimination against those with disabilities in programs that receive federal funding. And then we have No Child Left Behind, NCLB, in the 2000s. Which um, it was school accountability to governmental entities regarding school or student progress. Yeah. So there are rights that parents have. It is a legal requirement that parents be given a copy of their rights. Um, and so parents have the right to acquire confidential treatment of their child's records, review and inspect the records, have copies of all records, and any documentation requiring their students on file with the school. Permission must be obtained to release records to non-school personnel in writing by the school. They must be notified in advance, which is 10 days, of any meeting pertaining their child. They can request an assessment of their child. They can be appraised of the assessment tools being used and have the child assessed in their own language. They can request an independent evaluation at the public expense. If they don't agree with the district's evaluation, they can have input in the development of the IEP. They can refuse services or placement in special education. Um, they can have an independent, fully paid private school placement if it is deemed necessary to meet the child's needs, and they can request and have a fair hearing if disagreements arise in regard to um, the identification, placement, or services for their child. So now we're going to compare IDEA and Section 504 of the Civil Rights Act. So the IDEA, the purpose of it is a federal institute to ensure appropriate services for dis, disabled children. And the purpose of Section 504 is it's a civil rights law to protect the rights of individuals with handicaps in programs that receive federal funding or financing. The scope for IDEA is all school-age children who fall into those categories. And for 504, it is all school-age children qualified as handicapped who have or have had physical or mental impairment that affects a major life activity. The funding for IDEA provides additional funds for eligible students, and 504 does not provide extra funding. Enforcement of IDEA is the U.S. Department of Education. In 504, it's a Civil Rights Act, so the Office of Civil Rights. Evaluation, IDEA requires written notice to parents and inform parent consent, which must be written, and have a full evaluation by a team of people. And for 504, it requires notice to the parent, and it's not a formal evaluation. For placement for IDEA, it provides an independent evaluation at public expense if the parents disagree with the school evaluation, and there's a reevaluation not required for change of placement. And change is an IEP team review decision. For 504, it does not provide an independent evaluation, and reevaluation is required for a change in placement. For documentation and due process for both of these, both laws dictate that there should be thorough documentation, and they require a hearing for parents and guardians who disagree with the identification, evaluation, and placement of the student. So parents as advocates, they need to know how to best advocate for their child. So there are organizations set in place to help them. Such organizations are the Learning Disabilities Association. They give information about the types of educational legislation that is put in place. They have a sample form letters to send to schools, and they provide information about the different types of learning disabilities. There is Reading Rockets, which provide videos that spell out the advocacy process and how to be successful. And then there is Rights Law, which puts on training seminars, offers advocacy information sheets online, and has a number of books out that list legal issues involving or involved in advocating for children with learning disabilities. Now we'll go on to students' rights. So the student has the right to receive due process if he or she gets in trouble at school, and the student shall know the charges, be heard in defense of self, and has the right to review all documents that support the charges, be treated at all times with respect and courtesy by all members of the school staff, receive a prompt hearing if he or she is suspended or faces expulsion or involuntary transfer, expects a safe learning environment, receives FAPE, and be provided accommodations for his or her learning disabilities. Teachers also have rights. So they have the right to work in a safe environment, be treated respectfully by their students, have the right to be able to teach. They have an obligation to notify parents before beginning in the evaluation process to set up the IEP. They have an obligation to follow the guidelines set forth by the IEP, and teachers should realize that parents have rights by law, and they have access to assess and have copies of anything teachers add to a student's file. So a BIP, which is a behavior intervention plan, this is whenever an IEP is written, it is necessary to consider the student's social and emotional and behavioral needs. If there is a significant problem in any of these areas, the IEP committee should examine all the ways to help the student. For example, if a student has difficulties following school or classroom rules, they should be evaluated. They should evaluate the child's behavioral needs. A meeting should then be scheduled with the parents for the purpose of writing the BIP. And then the BIP can help replace the unwanted behaviors with positive behaviors. Suspension and expulsion rights. Regulations allow a school to suspend a student for um, a period of up to 10 days a year. Before the district can suspend a student, however, for the 11th day, the IEP team must meet to either write a BIP or and behavior goals, or to review the existing BIP to see if it is still appropriate for the student. When expulsion is being considered for a student, a pre-expulsion IEP meeting must be held.